family history is rich and varied. I can trace it back 63 generations. It's enough to make kings and vagabonds believe the very best. But there are gaps. There are things I don't know. On one side, I can only trace it back as far as the 1800s. My great-grandfather, or one of them, I'll never be able to trace because my great-grandmother fucked a random Swede. The other one, the other big mystery, was my twice great-grandfather Thomas, who disappeared for 30 years, or who disappears from the records for 30 years. In 1841, he's 5 years old, living on a farm on the Isle of Man, by the sea. It's a little bit pole dark. There's shirtless scything going on. People are riding horses along the cliffs. Somebody's running in every so often shouting that there's been an accident down the local copper mine. The local landowner is holding needless grudges for years and years and years, and hold on, that is pole dark, isn't it? The next time Thomas appears is 1871, again on the Isle of Man, where he's shacked up with a married woman. I couldn't find any trace of him for the intervening 30 years. Until recently. It took some detective work, but I found him. The first step was to work out what happened to his parents. His father, John, I found out died in 1849. Great. So what about his mother? Knowing that her husband was dead, I was able to find her in the place where she was born, a place called Castletown, which is on the Isle of Man and not Westeros, and she was living as a pauper. Interesting. So in that situation, with his father dead, his mother as a pauper, what is the 15-year-old Thomas going to be doing? He's either going to be in an institution somewhere, or he's going to be trying to earn a bit of money as maybe an apprentice or in some kind of industry. That was the clue I needed to find him on the census. And I found him on the 1851 census in Liverpool, working as a baker. Fantastic. If only there weren't so many people on the Isle of Man born in the same year with the same name. Then, finding him in 1861 wouldn't have been so hard. Because I know that at some point between 1851 and 1871, he gets married and his wife dies. In 1871, he's widowed. There are so many people with the same name born on the Isle of Man in the same year, getting married in those 20 years with wives who either had the same first name or who died. I was able to narrow it down, but I could only narrow it down to about 6 candidates. 3 once I worked out that I could include his father's name as well. Doesn't help that Thomas, every once in a blue moon, claimed he was older than he was. So it seemed I could go no further. Except, after 1871, he ends up with the married woman, marrying the married woman, who by 1878 is widowed. He ends up marrying her and they move to Runcorn, where she dies in 1897, and then he goes back to the Isle of Man, marries someone else, they have a child. He names his daughter after his previous wife, which is a bit creepy. Runcorn. That was the clue I needed to find the wife. The 19th century, there are 2 burials in Runcorn with that surname. Only 2. Could it be a coincidence that he moved to Runcorn where there was virtually nobody with his surname, apart from one person who was buried there in 1866? I don't think it was a coincidence. So let's check this name. Eliza. Was there a Thomas who married an Eliza on the Isle of Man prior to 1866? Oh yes. Gotcha. 1864. Thomas marries Eliza. So obviously, they move to Runcorn, she dies, he moves back to the Isle of Man and shacks up with a married woman. And yes, that meant I was able to find him in 1861. He's living in Ardwick, in Manchester. So, turns out those missing 30 years, they weren't anything incredible, anything exciting. He wasn't on bold adventures somewhere, he wasn't some criminal. Just turns out he was a little bit difficult to find.